Okay, a little survey. How many of you have ever played Chutes and Ladders? Chutes and Ladders is one of those really frustrating board games. You roll the dice and you move your way up this pathway that has 100 squares. Seems pretty straightforward. Whoever gets to the finish line first wins. But every so often you land on a square with a ladder and you go forward quite a few spaces. But every so often you hit a square that has a chute and it sends you back to the beginning. Now a lot of times in this game when I was playing it, it would end up with the board thrown on the floor and all the pieces scattered. I wasn't the one who did that. Much. But I will tell you this, there are people who say that if that's not the way the game ends, you probably really didn't play it. A lot of times we get that way in life. We're kind of feeling like we're trucking along, climbing the ladder, moving forward along the pathway, and then something goes sideways. Let me give you an example of that. Every so often, a person will get into a little bit of trouble, let's say, with their parents. Okay? Every once in a while, something goes wrong. Something goes sideways. How many of you have ever heard your parents say to you when you were a kid, or those kids who are here, how many of you have ever heard your mom or dad say, "I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed"? How many of you have ever heard that? I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. I'm not sure I can trust you any longer. And you're there, no, not the trust word. In those kinds of circumstances, it's like you go down that chute, you feel like you've fallen backwards. Now, if Chutes and Ladders had existed in Jesus' time, they would have simply called him Peter. Because Peter was always trucking along with Jesus, walking along that path, rolling the dice, moving forward, and every so often he would start climbing the ladder. Remember a couple of weeks ago when it was stormy and Jesus was walking on water, and Peter said, ooh, can I walk on water too? Jesus said, come. Peter steps out of the boat and he begins to walk on water. He's climbing the ladder. But then he notices the storm and he starts to sink. And Jesus pulls him out. Peter lifts up his hands and calls upon God's name, as we heard in the song. He lifts up his hands and he's rescued. Jesus says to him, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Basically, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. So Peter slides down the chute. A couple of weeks back, we heard the story of the Transfiguration. Peter, James, and John are climbing that ladder up to a mountain. Up on that mountaintop, they experience the transfigured Jesus. And Peter, ooh, can I build a tent? Can I put up a booth? And Jesus, come on, we have to go back down. Chutes and ladders, up and down. Last week, Peter was the one who declared that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said that you are the rock upon which I will build my church. Peter is almost at the finish line. Man, he has climbed the ladder. He's way ahead of everyone else. Fantastic. You are the rock. Just a few moments later, today's gospel, just a few moments later, Peter steps in front of Jesus. "No, Lord, I will not allow you to go to Jerusalem." He's full of himself. He's ready to protect Jesus. Wow. Jesus is not disappointed, he's mad. "Get behind me, Satan. You are an obstacle, a stumbling block." You're a stumbling block. Peter went from being a building block to a stumbling block. What's the difference between a building block and a stumbling block? A building block knows its place. It is fit into the very living structure of the community. stumbling block just sits around getting in the way, tripping us up. Now this isn't the last time for Peter. Next week we hear the story of Jesus telling people to forgive, try to forgive, and Peter following, I've got the answer. I have forgiven my brother 7 times. I'm sure Andrew's over there going, really? You've forgiven me 7 times? Not that I remember. But Jesus puts Peter back into his place. He says, Peter, 7 times, 70 times, then come see me. Chutes and Ladders. Of course, Peter says, I will never desert you. A few minutes later, denies Jesus 3 times. And it's not just Peter. It's not just Peter. It's the other apostles as well. James and John, they want to climb up the ladder to be at his left and right hand side when he comes into the kingdom. And Jesus said, you don't understand what you're asking for. And in embarrassment, they head down the chute. They were asking to be at the left-hand and right-hand side of Jesus when he came into his kingdom, which is on the cross. To be at his left and right. Thomas doubts. All the apostles flee in the Garden of Gethsemane. They all stumble and fall. In a sense, they roll the dice. And they move forward and they slide backward. That's the way of life for a disciple of Jesus. And what's true for them is true for us. Just like the apostles, we try to follow, but we stumble and fall. Our faith feels like it's being tested. We fall backward. In the midst of our grief or loss or confusion, we hit that chute and we fall backward toward square one. Instead of climbing up toward our destination of heaven, we slide back in disappointment and disarray. So I'm going to ask for some witnesses right now. No judgment at all. No judgment at all. How many of you have ever doubted your faith, doubted God, doubted the church, doubted Christianity? How many of you have ever had doubts in your heart at times during your faith journey? At times those doubts eat away at us, and sometimes we slip away from our faith for days or weeks or months or years. How many of you have ever stepped away from your faith? Stepped away from the church for days or weeks or months or years? How many of you have ever done that? I'm going to ask the young people in here right now. A lot of times you feel like you come to this parish, you come to the church, and you're wondering, what does it have for me? What do I get out of church? It's the same thing over and over and over again, and my mom and dad wake me up in the morning and they bring me here, and I'm not sure why. Young people here, how many of you have ever had that in your heart? You've wondered why. Why am I here? Yeah, I see those hands. You are like Peter, like James, like John. Every single one of us sitting in here is a follower of Christ. We are called to follow the cross. Not maybe to take the lead on that pathway of chutes and ladders, but to follow the cross of Christ. And there will be times when we slide back on the chute, where we feel like not coming to church, where we feel like not being dedicated and devoted to our faith or to God. That will happen to every one of us. But here's the good news. We've got to answer this question. Did Jesus ever give up on Peter? Did he ever give up on Peter? Did he ever give up on his disciples? Does he ever give up on us? He simply asks us to take those dice in our hands, to roll them, and if we stumble and fall and head down that chute, to not be afraid to get back up again and roll the dice and keep walking forward behind I want to say in my heart, I know that some of you are going through some really tough times, heartbreaking times. It hurts. And it hurts to see you hurt. And I know in my heart that there are people in this parish who want to reach out to you and support you if you've slid down that chute a little bit or if you're being tested in any way. You are not alone. You're not. We've got your back, even when it doesn't feel like it. And we want to be here for you. So here we are. Another Sunday. More Sundays ahead. My call is Christ's call. Get back and follow. As he said to Peter, get behind me. Get behind me. The cross is not the only destination, it's the door. And it leads us to something eternal. And in our pain, our sorrow, our loss, when we feel like that chute has led us backwards, God remains with us. We shouldn't be duped, as Jeremiah was duped, because we're being duped by a loving God who calls us to stand back up again and get back in the game, and to not turn over the table, but to keep on trying. Last thing. In the psalm it says, I lift up my hands and I call upon your name. We represent Christ in this world. We are the hands and feet of Christ. And because of that, we are the ones who reach back to people in need, who have fallen or slid. That's on us. Children, adults, parents, grandparents, people single, priests, deacons, all of us. We are the ones who reach out to each other, to lift those in need and walk with them on the pathway. This is our call. This is our faith, which we are proud to profess in Christ Jesus on earth. God bless.